Hi there, everybody. Just want to say on behalf of Viacode, I want to welcome you to our webinar series. I'm Scott Harris. I'm Viacode's president, and I'm joined today by Victor Muscatin, our CEO. Who is Viacode? Viacode was founded as Avicode back in 2001 as an enterprise software development company. So we know what it's like to build and manage production software. In 2004, we launched our own product called Intercept Studio that was used by thousands of companies worldwide to manage and provide operational insights into production applications. That product was sold to Microsoft in 2010 and embedded in their System Center platform, or SCOM. At that time, Avicode was renamed Viacode because Microsoft got the Avicode name in the deal. Our CTO at the time was Victor Muscatin, who went on to Microsoft in the deal. As I mentioned, Victor's here today as Viacode's CEO to talk about operational excellence in Azure. Victor spent the better part of 8 years at Microsoft as a group program manager on the SCOM and Azure product teams, helping Microsoft to envision and build their ops management strategy. His last role at Microsoft was as the group program manager for the Azure Application Insights product. In 2018, Victor returned to Viacode. He continued to leverage our operations and monitoring experience and our ongoing work with Microsoft product teams to provide products and services that are specifically architected and built for Azure. So we're in the business of helping clients with Azure cloud migration, optimization, and management. Today's topic is part one of a well-architected framework series where we're focused on operational excellence. In general, Microsoft's well-architected framework for Azure is, well, robust. There's a lot to know and a lot to learn about operational excellence in Azure, and it can be complex knowing what matters to you and what you should focus on. Also, it's worth noting that operational excellence principles cannot be implemented in a vacuum. Implementation of these operational excellence aspects will have a broad impact on any organization, and more specifically, it'll impact people both in operations and in development. So there's got to be cooperation between these groups, and there may not be an easy that may not be an easy thing in a lot of organizations. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Victor, who's been drinking coffee all morning and should be ready to help you solve all your problems. Victor?
Thanks, Scott. Hello, everybody. As Scott mentioned, my name is Victor Muscatin, and today we will be talking about Microsoft well-architected framework. While preparing for this webinar, I was trying to figure out what this Microsoft Azure well-architected framework means to me personally. And it reminded me the case that we had at Viacode, where during one of those monthly service review, we noticed a dip in leads that we are collecting from Azure Marketplace. And we started digging deeper into the root cause of that, and we realized that we lost that month 97% of all leads. So 97%. That was a big blow. And the reason was that we released something new, Microsoft changed the API, and because we were not testing properly those integrations, we were not monitoring in production, it turned out that we missed the problem, integration problem, and we lost the lead. So to me, operational excellence is essentially well-architected framework in general, and operational excellence in particular is about helping improve the quality of the service. So if you look at well-architected framework, it's a set of best practices broken down into five major pillars. One is essentially cost optimizations that focuses on best practices, how to optimize your running infrastructure, your infrastructure in Azure to maximize the value that it produces for you. Operational excellence specifically focusing on making sure that your system is up and running. The performance efficiency pillar covers aspect of essentially elasticity of the cloud, how to elastically decrease or increase the infrastructure based on the changes in the load for your service. Reliability covers the essentially high availability requirements for your infrastructure. In other words, when data centers or a particular service goes down, how to bring it back up in I don't know, in the same data center or in some another availability zone, etc. And the last but not least, security helps you first of all, understand the shared security responsibility between Microsoft and you, depending on what services you use, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, and help you really tighten the security controls to make sure that you are that the depth of security is good enough to prevent malicious user to hack into your system. So today we will be focusing on operational excellence, and we're going to cover key concept. And as you may assume that there are a lot of theory behind operational excellence. So we will help you figure out where to start. Like our approach, we give customers, our recommendations, we give our customers on how to apply operational excellence best practices in their cases, in their environment. And we're going to demonstrate it using our own journey, implementing operational excellence, delivering our services, delivering our products, and issues that we found, challenges that we had to address. So it's going to be a real life examples of what we went through on that journey. Even though operational excellence starts with the word operation, it's not only about ops folks. So if you look at from the high level, you can break down all those principles into set of principles geared towards development and set of principles geared towards operations. For example, from development standpoint, nobody's questioning whether you need to have a source code these days. And I'm sure that a lot of people do implement CI, continuous integration, and some implement continuous delivery in order to speed up the delivery cycle. There are lots of different testing that you may employ: unit testing, stress testing, test in production, smoke testing, you name it, automated, manual. Containers. We see a lot of customers as they trying to speed up their development, as they're trying to lower the servicing cost, they move into containers. And that's also a big part of operational excellence pillar. As you mature your product, and I remember as we were delivering application sites, we were delivering a lot of features under feature flag. So we deliver them in production, and then we let only select few of our MVPs to give them a secret key to turn on particular feature to get a feedback before it rolls out to everyone's. Telemetry instrumentation. I'm sure that you've heard about, let's say, I don't know, Google Analytics or maybe Mixpanel. So there are telemetry instrumentation to collect user usage related information. There's telemetry instrumentation availability and performance information. So that's all best practices, set of best practices geared towards development primarily. And then there is a set of us geared towards operations that focuses on implementing reliable, repeatable deployments. That's infra as code. That's focusing on how to minimize impact of deployment on your users. For example, implementing canary deployment, where you release your new version and then you put only 5% of the traffic to it, and then if it's working, you put 20% and 50%. As a matter of fact, a lot of services at Microsoft use that a lot. Blue-green deployments is when you release into, let's say, a staging slot, and then you swap between staging and production. Most common. It's used for web apps. Governance, that's where you focus on compliance, on making sure that you maintain the security and cost at a particular level. That's where you focus on, I don't know, various certifications, SOX and HIPAA, etc. And the monitoring and support, that's how you make your customers happy by proactively monitoring for issues or reactively responding to customer requests. So when we talk to our customers or people look at the operational excellence framework, they have all sorts of questions. First of all, there is a lot of inside that documentation. There's a lot of best practices, and people's questioning whether they need it all or whether implementing it is too expensive for my organizations. And in many cases, people just don't know where to start. Well, we recommend you to look at it from two angles. First of all, from the maturity standpoint. I'm sure that your project goes through phases of maturity when you just start and you want to just validate some hypothesis, all the way down to, I don't know, your project's already 5 years in production, pretty mature customer base, pretty mature processes. So you need to think about that from the maturity perspective, as well as from resource perspective. So if you have plenty available resources, by all means, just do as many as possible of those, implement as many as possible of those best practices. Sure, like every organizations, you have a scarcity of experience and resources. So you need to figure out the appropriate balance of what, where to start and what best practices you need to actually focus on. I won't be able to speak today about your resources. However, I would like to offer you to think about applicability of Azure well-architected framework, operational excellence best practices in accordance to your product and process maturity phase. And for that, I'm going to use tried and true Geoffrey Moore technology adoption life cycle, essentially from the book Crossing the Chasm. And I would like to apply operational maturity best practices to each individual phases of the project. So as you start some new product, you don't know much about what it will end up being. You're just starting with MVP, and you talk to usually like early adopter visionaries who believe in what you believe in. They're willing to debug issues with you. They just want what you have, and for that matter, the most important goal for the project at that stage is hypothesis validation. And in order to hypothesis validate in the most efficient and effective, you need to a handful of operational excellence best practices. First of all, you need to have source control. That's a non-negotiable start. And then you need to implement CI/CD to be able to really crank that loop, feedback loop, into production. Most likely, in order to speed up development, you would need look into containers. And later I'll show you how we used it to speed up development of our product. And in many cases, we see customers look into containers because they need to integrate a lot of different stacks with some open source stacks together into coherent system and simplify the servicing of that, where each container can be independently. And at that moment, you are mostly focused on telemetry collection. Maybe you use analytics, maybe use Microsoft Azure Application Insights. But that's where you are looking to get as much information about user experience with your application to validate your hypothesis. That's the project phase of your product maturity. As you mature, as you start kind of crossing the chasm and start talking to pragmatists and pain, so folks who are who have actual particular problem and want your product, that's where the most important goal you have is to keep them happy, because they don't want to debug your product with you anymore. They want you to come and solve their problem. So focusing on happy customer is the goal for product at that phase. And there are a handful of best practices in operational excellence pillar related to testing, uh, infra code, and monitoring and support. So that's where all those practices would help you keep your customer happy, because if your customer happy at that stage, they will spread the word about your product, and you can go to the next phase of your maturity eventually to a product where you have essentially it's a herd mentality. The customers buy your product not because they have particular pain, but because everybody's doing it and they don't want to be left behind. So that's essentially, at that point, you mostly focused on standardization and scale. So you are looking at making sure that your deployment in production as uneventful as possible. That's where I mentioned like feature flag is very useful, where developers hide certain functionality behind the feature flag and release it in the disabled state, and essentially enable it later after the fact, or when you implement this canary or blue-green deployments. That's the stage where you really focus on governance to tighten all the security and compliance concerns, for example. And if you notice, for example, Microsoft Azure claims to have the biggest set of certifications. That's because they're on a very mature stage of their development. So this is the framework that we recommend you to implement in accordance to the phase that your project in.
So, hey, Victor, let me jump in for a second if I can. We did get one question, which I think I might be able to address. Actually, somebody asked about what the chasm was that we were referencing here. And if you read Jeffrey Moore's book about crossing the chasm, essentially what he's talking about is people that are in the project phase, not many of those people get to the solution phase, meaning they don't do the things they need to do where their product begins to get accepted by the marketplace at scale. And so that's kind of, he talks about doing the right things to get your product from kind of this early stage into a stage where it's accepted broadly in the marketplace. The good news is, Victor, I think you have some examples and thoughts on next steps for everybody, don't you?
Yeah. Thanks, Scott. We'll cover definitely those first two stages of the project maturity in greater detail. Just one more comment I want to make with respect to maturity. At the early stages of the maturity of your product, it's mostly about devs. As you see from the set of best practices. As you mature with your product, as you go through those phases, as you notice, you involve more and more ops to really, and the product phases, this is a lot about ops, making sure that your product is up and running and deliver appropriate quality of service. So as I mentioned before, we will go through some of real life examples. And for that, I want to talk to you about our own journey when we just started one of our internal products. As Scott mentioned, we as a company, we provide Azure Cloud migration, optimization, and management services. As part of our Azure managed service, we help customers to maintain their Azure environments up and running. So we had to implement a system that would collect all the signals from Azure, provide ticketing support. Essentially, we needed to implement a ticketing system. We looked through the market. We looked at ServiceNow, Service Desk, Zendesk, you name it. So we've looked at a lot of systems. The issue was that either it was expensive, or it was there was not functionality that we're looking for. And some of the systems were too complex to implement, and we didn't want to invest into a learning curve. So this decision was made to find some open source components in the market and build a ticketing system that we need. So what we needed a system that first of all collected the data, all the inputs from Azure. Let's say Azure cost alerts, Azure advisor recommendation, Azure security center recommendations and alerts, Azure Sentinel incidents, right, threats, Azure monitor alerts. All of those are different. So we had to connect that to a lightweight ticketing system that any dev manager, and we're very techie organizations, any dev manager will be able to quickly implement and start participating in. And because we needed to support collaborative environment, that system had to be integrated with Teams, where SREs, our L1 support, our developers could elaborate around particular customer issues, as well as all long running projects we wanted to maintain as part of Azure DevOps, on the Kanban boards. So we had a very unique set of requirements that we couldn't find in open market. So we decided to build a system. And then we run into lots of challenges. First of all, when we picked OSS-based solution, open source solution, Zamad, it was a set of stack of open source technology. We had to extend it with our own APIs written in, let's say, .NET Core. And then we had to deploy it in Azure. And while deploying in Azure, we needed to find the most cost-effective operational model and support and servicing model. So as a result, this is our journey that we went through. First of all, we immediately realized that we had to use containers and implement each individual services as a container, because then we can service them better. And it allows us to essentially lift and shift a lot of pieces of our technology relatively quickly, while preserving development environment using Docker desktop for local development. So it was an appropriate and acceptable solution. When we started looking at running containers in Azure Cloud, we consider all four options. We consider AKS, Kubernetes, we consider container instances, we consider running Docker on a VM, and we consider web app for containers. And quite frankly, the most economical and usable solution for us was web app for containers. Again, we love Docker, we love Kubernetes, but for us, due to some very unique requirements of our solution, it turned out that web app for containers offers very unique set of features that simplified our deployment model. And in addition to that, as I mentioned before, we implemented multiple containers and used Docker Compose to run our container environment. We used managed app. I don't know if you've heard about that functionality. We used managed app to simplify servicing for our customers. Managed app basically allows development organizations to maintain access to the bits, to the execution environment on the customer, inside the customer tenant. So that allows us to implement servicing for pieces of our infra that we're installing in customer environment. And then we used ARM to deploy our product in Azure. So right now, I want to show you how what we've done for our product at that stage. And in order to do that, I'm going to use a live demo. And I've been told that I should be staying away from live demo these days because nobody actually can differentiate whether it's live or recorded, but I prefer to show the real thing. So bear with me. I hope that that Microsoft Azure will cooperate. So as I mentioned, we deliver our product as Azure Marketplace product. We quite frankly went through that maturity phase where we were at the project phase, and we productize our offering and put it on for a public consumption. But as we were doing this, we realized that we have issues. So when customer select and click create button when they want to install this one of our products, Vicode Incident Management System, they fail. Like when they go through this steps, they fail. So we wanted to introduce a testing for this. And what we did is we went to our CI/CD pipeline that we implemented using Azure DevOps. And yeah.
No, sorry to interrupt you. There was a question that might be appropriate to answer now. Somebody asked why using ARM, ARM instead of code solution IaaC like Terraform?
Oh, that's a very good question. You're absolutely correct. You can use declaratively either ARM or Terraform. In our case, we just have more experience with ARM, and the Azure managed apps have built-in support for ARM. So that's what we used. We used basically ARM to deploy Azure managed apps application. So it was easier for us. But you're absolutely correct. You could use Terraforms as well. Going back, so we have a release pipeline where if I go to our releases, so we have this pipeline where we have pipeline, our build pipeline, Vim's free. Then we developed a Vim's deploy pipeline that let me show it to you. That basically runs on a schedule. It takes build pipeline artifacts, okay, and on a schedule, Monday through Friday. If something changes, it does the release. And then what we did is we implemented a deployment from a service catalog, which is very similar to Azure Marketplace for our purpose. When after the release, we kick on this deployment. So that's a CD part of CI/CD. And basically, as part of this deployment, we go through a particular step. We create resource group, we create a storage account and and blob storage. We use the artifact from our build pipeline, Vim's free zip file, and then we create service catalog definitions using this artifacts, and then essentially we deploy this application, and that deploy is mimicking that create button. So the idea was that we implemented this to validate that we didn't screw up the our ARM templates when we built a new release. So that's how we solved our solution. And as a result, what we did, what you see as a result of that step, I have this infra already prepared. We create resource group with lots of resources, functions, web apps, some storage account, key vaults, etc. So we have all the resources that needed to operate, in our case, Vim's. Vicode Incident Management System created. And if you look at the web app, I'm going to web applications, and you can see that if I go to container settings, come on, Azure, you can do it. Okay, you can see that we're using Docker Compose feature. It's still in preview, where we use Docker Hub images, and you see our three containers. One is essentially the mod-based ticketing system, open source ticketing system that we have. Then we had to implement a particular, for our needs, particular API using .NET Core, and you see another container. And then we used Nginx as a router between the two. So you see all those three containers here. Okay, so that's how we used CI/CD pipeline and containers to quickly deliver our product in a project phase. Let me go back to the doc. So now, as we moved with our product to solution phase, we started, as I mentioned, we offered it not only to our IT to support customers, but we offer it to general public through Azure Marketplace. We realized that we ourselves need to implement monitoring and support for our product. And we were mostly focused on two main scenarios for product support. First of all, we needed to provide email support, where customers sending us email, we want to be able to receive that request. And second, we want to be able to proactively monitor that infrastructure. So if you look at the kind of architecture of our products, imagine bunch of customers installing our VIMs with OpenSite, instrumented with application insights, and we needed to support it somehow. So what we did is we collect all that telemetry in a Vicode subscriptions, Vicode tenant inside Log Analytics. We configure monitoring using Azure Monitor alerts rules, and we used our own product VIMs and ITSM connector to take all that monitoring exhaust, interpret it in a form of failure modes like a alert rule, and create tickets inside ticketing system. And VIMs also support emails, email stream. So it was a good solution for our own support flow, as well as VIMs integrated into a Azure DevOps. So we used, in our case, we used VIMs. In your case, you could use pretty much anything else, any other ticketing system that that is available in your organizations. So what we had to address, as I mentioned, our challenge was that our product was installed in multiple Azure environments, and we were looking for something inexpensive from servicing and from operation standpoint for both Vicode and our customers. And it was important for us to integrate our SREs, our monitoring team, who are essentially focused on receiving all those tickets and doing the L1 triage, with our development Kanban board. And as a result, as I mentioned, we did collect telemetry from multiple workspaces. We configured alert in vicode.com environment, and we installed the VIM's ticketing system, connector, and Azure DevOps. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you our actual implementation of our support process using our own system. So to do so, again, I'm going back to my demo rig, and I want to show you this is our ticketing system. So, and I'm looking at the new incidents, and as you can see, there's no incidents yet. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use remember, I deployed VIMs in our test environments, and I'm going to use this, and we're monitoring this particular VIMs. And right now, as you can see, it's working, right? So if I click refresh, it's working. Now I'm going to do something very stupid, but believe me, that happens. I go to this VIMs and I click stop button. So effectively, I stopped the site, right? Now, the result of that action obviously will be that if I try to refresh, it's dead, right? So at this point, my customer is not happy. Granted, it could be the problem might be like a better real bug problem, but the point is that customer VIMs is unavailable and it's a problem. So usually we see that customer does this. Product support. If I can type product support, send to product support, and it's not working, and sending us something that it's not working. Okay. Right. So at this point, we should be able to receive inside our VIMS environment a couple tickets, and it takes time for the infrastructure to process it. So again, this is a real live live demo. Pretty soon, what we will see is first, typically, we will see the ticket, this ticket, email ticket. So if I go to this email, imagine that this is a real bug. So our L1 realized that this is not an operational issue that they can fix. So what they do in real life, they go and click delegate. And what you see here, we configured our integration with Azure DevOps that this ticket will go to, well, via code to a particular team in our development team called Spiderweb in a particular area in the Spiderweb product support. So once I click here, okay, in a few seconds, Azure DevOps connector will take that ticket and will turn it into a bug in Azure DevOps. So let's wait and see. It will take a couple seconds to, and what we'll see here is essentially a link into Azure DevOps. It's a demo effect, still not there. Okay, here we go. So what you see here is this ticket now is integrated with Azure DevOps, and what you can do is you can click on this ticket and jump directly into Azure DevOps environment. Okay, so this allows essentially operations folks not only to escalate issues to Azure DevOps, but because Azure DevOps is a bidirectional sync, you can see what's going on in the development side with that particular issue. So that keeps everyone in the know. Okay. In the meantime, if I go back to my tickets, I don't still see the monitoring ticket, but basically, maybe later during the demo, I'll come back to it. In about a minute or 2 minutes, our monitoring infra will pick up that particular VIMS is down, and we would be able to see a ticket here that VIMS is down. So I won't wait until it will appear. Let me go back to my demo. So you basically have seen how we've implemented monitoring and support. And again, for us, we were mostly we're focusing on two scenarios. One is manual ticket, manual problem escalation via emails, and another escalation via through our monitoring system that we implemented. And that you saw that we were able to kind of integrate all of that into Azure DevOps. So now, just to summarize, operational excellence is for you. In the long run, it will help you save money and time. At the same time, you need to be mindful which best practices to implement depending on the stage of your project maturity. And I would recommend you to consider appropriate Microsoft and third-party tooling to get this job done. Essentially, Microsoft Azure platform mature a lot. I remember starting with Azure back at Microsoft, I don't know, 7 years ago. And looking at Azure where it is now, I see Microsoft either developed or acquired companies to really provide well-rounded management stack. But obviously, there are always areas for improvements, and do consider third-party solutions, and there are plenty on the market. So as the next step, what I recommend you look into operational excellence documentation, and specifically implementation of CI/CD and containers. We used Microsoft Stack, and we're quite happy with that. So I know that you might be Atlassian fans, and you might use Jira, you might use Jenkins, but we've used Azure DevOps, and it was really good for us. We used containers a lot, and Microsoft provides containers. As a matter of fact, I did mention that Microsoft is running not only Windows anymore. The containers that we use are Linux-based. If your project in the solution phase, I think that monitoring and support is one of the key areas that you need to look into. And look at the tools around, look into Azure application sites, look at the Azure Monitor, look at third-party tooling for monitoring and support that I demonstrated, like our tooling or any other tools that you find on the market. And on the product phase, I do recommend you to look into governance aspects, how to make sure that your operational infrastructure stay intact. Essentially, you preserve that security posture. You keep a tab on your cost, and that you don't have gaps in your monitoring. So that's what I would recommend you to consider as a next step.
Great, thanks, Victor. Hey, so Victor prescribed a few possible next steps based on kind of your current phase. Vicode's a technical organization of Azure Cloud Geeks, and so certainly we're happy with no obligation or cost to have a brief consultative call with anybody to help you figure out, to help you find your way and prioritize your focus, how you focus on your efforts. It's not unusual for customers to learn something valuable during these calls, even if they don't engage with us. We have a lot of products and services that help clients with Azure, but there's lots of companies out there that can help you with Azure and help you with your cloud journey and operational excellence. So whether you use us or somebody else, our advice would be don't hesitate and don't be afraid to get help. It will save you time and money. If you're interested, Victor's got a new slide up here. If you're interested in our experience working with Azure and you want to get a sense for how well you're running Azure as it relates to cost and security and visibility, you can try out this Azure Snapshot tool. It's a free 30-second self-service, read-only Azure health check, and there's no risk on your part. So with that, I want to thank you all for participating in the webinar. We'll send a link to the recording and the slides, so don't hesitate to share that with others. And we look forward to having you on our next webinar next month. Thanks, Victor.
Thank you very much.